Good evening and welcome to the Florida Department of Health outreach location for the MSM population called Fusion. Tonight we're going to hear some tales from Vienna. The world's AIDS community converged upon Vienna for the International AIDS Conference. More than 16,000 delegates traveled to Vienna, Austria for the 18th conference last July. Leading the news during the conference, the first ever antiviral-based gel to show effectiveness in preventing HIV in women. Doctors don't usually get a standing ovation when presenting data from a study, but it took place in this convention. Now I'd like to introduce members of the board at Fusion, Sean, who is also the secretary for the board, and he will now take over and lead us in this convention discussion. Thank you.
Hi, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And this began when I got the address of the website for the AIDS conference in Vienna. And I don't know if this was the first time it was available, but I actually was able to follow the conference on the website. And before, I had never done that. I had done that either through newspapers or not followed it at all, but I was able to follow it almost exactly and get a whole sense of it. And I looked at it, I thought this would be an interesting thing to try and talk about. And a lot of interesting things came out of the conference. So first of all, why should we look at HIV around the world? There's a variety of reasons for it. One is if you look at something you're familiar with in a different light, you get a different perspective on it. It changes the way you think about it. You see it differently, it stimulates creativity. Secondly, in the U.S., we tend to have a habit of provincialism. Oh, great. Why is this not going forward? For instance, there's been an MSM HIV project in Morocco for 15 years, which a lot of people, I didn't know about, I don't think a lot of people knew about, and it's important, particularly in terms of jihadist conspiracies, that we understand MSM issues in Arab and Muslim countries, particularly since they're going to be a critical part of forming a civil society and creating a moderate or progressive Islamic bloc. And this is one way to look at it, and we have something in common, so we have a way to look at it that transcends a lot of boundaries. Secondly, a lot of people have emotional ties to countries outside the U.S. I'm sorry, I can't seem to get this to the next screen. It worked perfectly, of course, when I was playing with it yesterday. So, in a world linked by trade, microbes know no borders. We have global trade, travel, goods, and people, but we don't have but microbes can go anywhere. And that's the other reason why we have to look at it. If there's an ill health in any part of the world, it will eventually come back to other parts of the world. Now what's going to come up here? Okay, something's completely different. All right. I think you can also think of it as disease unifying the world, because it does. We're all unified by the diseases that we're exposed to. Diseases historically have followed trade, commerce, and war. But it's how we respond to disease that creates the world that we live in. And I think a good case can be made that the way we responded to HIV, here we are, created the world we lived in. And I think we have a stronger community now because of how we responded to it, even with the death tolls, which were frankly about 2/3 to 3/4 of the people who are active in the gay male community in around 1980 died as a result of the epidemic. This is based on anecdotal and my own friendship networks. So, technology. Technology is one of the major themes of the conference, and how it has solved a lot of the information needs that were around. The second theme of the Congress was human rights as a key to controlling and understanding the epidemic, particularly the rights to health and freedom from prejudice, and the decriminalization of sodomy, sex work, and drug use. Because the criminalization of those three factors fueled the epidemic in a lot of ways. And the third theme of the conference would be medical interventions can now be used for HIV prevention. Now, technology and information access. The internet has killed print journalism, but print journalism historically has served the function of disseminating scientific research. And with the destruction, the elimination of the advertising base for print journalism, we now have this hole in how we find out information. But the web has also decentralized information. We can follow conferences anywhere around the world. We can access AIDS information anywhere in the U.S. For those of us that are monolingual English speakers, we can access it in England, we can access it in Australia, we can access it in India, because a lot of the stuff is English in those countries. So we have lots more information available if we know how to use it. But there are still barriers around dissemination and education that have to be overcome. In the early 80s, one of the big things with AIDS activists was getting people into conferences because of high conference costs to register, travel costs, and the need for scholarly credentials. There was a huge battle in the early 80s about regular people being able to walk into conferences. But with the advent of the putting stuff on websites, we now don't have to do that. A lot of those things have been solved. There also has been a general thing with conferences to put any material that is produced for the conference on the website so you can access it. Abstracts, papers, charts, posters, they're all on the websites now in a lot of conferences. Also, they have webinars, which are like televised videos of conference presentations or lectures. We could use them, for instance, in the waiting room of STD clinics. We could use them here. They can be used, we can educate ourselves around this stuff. Now, I'm going to go over some websites, and it's going to be relatively quick, but because we have other stuff to go through. That's not it. I'm sorry, my computer is so slow, but it is. This is a very important website. This is the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition website, and it's if you take, there's handouts over there. And by the way, if I use acronyms that people aren't familiar with, please ask me. And I would like to have as much conversation and dialogue as possible in this, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And Rob, could you hand out the one for critical websites to people? This is on the critical website list. If you look at this and go to the thing saying by prevention option, you can go to this website and you can get information on vaccines, microbial circumcision, PrEP, treatment as prevention, condoms, or human papillomavirus. Does anyone have any one of these they'd like to find out, they'd like to see?
What was the last one?
Human papillomavirus.
I don't know what that is.
That is a genital warts, and it's linked to causing cervical cancer in women, anal and penile cancer in gay men.
Is that common?
Yes.
It is common.
Yeah.
You said penile cancer?
Penile.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's the same warts that cause cervical cancer can also affect the penis and the anus.
Same
And,
way.
yeah, and they found heightened rates of anal cancer in gay men. And they're now recommending pap smears for gay men to see about dysplasia. The problem is, of course, that a lot of insurance won't pay for it. And I had a friend who had to have his doctor list him as a woman in order to get his insurance company to pay his pap smear. Anyhow,
Is there a good age to get a pap smear?
well,
A man? For a gay man?
you get them every few years, basically.
Like, starting when?
It doesn't starting after after you get fucked. Yeah, literally.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So if you go to the thing saying microbicides, again, this computer is so slow. I also have a lot of stuff up. Oh, let's go to the next one. I think I have too many things open.